For just a couple of years preceding his death, I was a big fan of Roger Ebert, one of the most famous film critics of all time. He had become just a writer for the Chicago Sun-Times website at the time that I discovered him. I never watched the old show he did. I basically was late to the party on Roger Ebert. I discovered him because of his great movies review on Pulp Fiction, which had been linked to by Ghostlightning in a blog post at some point, and it got me to read a lot more of his work. And Roger Ebert's main output was classified into two different styles of post. He had his reviews, which would come out like 4 or 5 a week, basically, about whatever new movies happened to come out that week. And then he would have his great movies review, which were longer, more in-depth, more analytical writings about movies that, are great, that he has loved throughout his history as a critic. And those regular reviews did basically nothing for me. They were short. They just kind of were about making a general quality judgment about a movie, essentially to tell you, hey, you should go see this movie, or hey, you should not go see this movie. If it sounds like something you're into, if your tastes align with mine, here's how I feel, and here's why. And I watch a lot of those kind of reviews still on YouTube. For instance, YMS does that very same style of review. And I like that he's not limited by a word count. He can basically make each review as long as he feels it should be for that movie. But nonetheless, that kind of review, it's interesting in as much as categorically going through a film lover's sort of thoughts on every single thing to just get the most robust possible view of their tastes. But unless I'm going to go see that movie, I don't really care that much. And I really think that the main purpose of reviews is to tell you about movies you already wanted to see. You already were curious about it. You just need to know if it lives up to your curiosity or not. It's not about discovering new movies. It can be if, say, YMS made a video in which he gives a movie a 10 out of 10, and I'm curious enough to watch all of his reviews, I might, end up checking out that movie because he gave it such a strong score, or maybe he just describes it in a way I think is interesting, or just seeing the images makes me curious about it. But I don't think that it's fair to consider this the purpose of reviews, because it's not why most people are coming to them. And this is evidenced just purely in view counts. If you look at what reviews get the most views, it's always going to be the most popular movies, the ones that the most people were going to see anyways. And on some level, there's the appeal of people wanting to justify the opinions that they already have. Particularly once a big movie comes out, a bunch of people are going to want to, compare their thoughts on the movie to yours, or just hear somebody possibly put their thoughts into words for them so that they can, understand their own feelings about it. But for the most part, these reviews are not super in-depth and analytical. They're not going to, awaken you to think of the film differently, except in maybe some very basic ways. Their purpose is mostly to tell you if the movie is overall good or not, and to justify that stance, in basically as little time as possible. And I think that's really fascinating because it shows me the way that people, and I have done this, for example. I've had cases where there was a movie I was curious about, I thought might be good, I don't know if I want to spend my money on it, let me watch some reviews, decide if I want to go see it. But I'm fascinated by the way that seems to be how so many people consume media, whereas for me, unless it is a case like I have to go to the movies and spend money to go see the movie, which I almost never do, I usually have the option of just going and watching the thing. Just go play the game. Just go watch the anime. Just go read the book or the manga or whatever, the comic. It's all online. I could do that instantaneously. I could just go look at it and find out for myself if it's good or not. And I understand that not everybody has necessarily the time or the know-how, or maybe they're even morally, they object to, piracy or whatever. But, I can't, like, imagine always, like, waiting to find out how other people feel about something before checking it out. Especially because I've never had a critic whose opinions aligned with mine even that often, you know? Like, there are some people who do, like, in-depth analysis of stuff who have covered enough things that I care about, and when they cover something that I've never heard of, I can reasonably make an expectation of whether I would like it or not based on what they're saying. But it's rare, and I can't off the top of my head think of a critic who every time they talk about something, maybe Hypocrite for video games, like every video he did on a game he loved convinced me I should play that game, even though I never did play any of them. But, you know, it's extremely rare that I get that effect. And so I know that's not what people are generally seeking. I know there are some people who watch my videos because they're hoping to learn about anime that they want to see, and those people are doing it right. That is how I want my videos to be watched. But there was this really interesting conversation I had with my brother Victor at his house the other day, where he watches all his anime all his YouTube through the PS4, and we were scrolling through, I guess both. We're scrolling through his subs, and the latest Mother's Basement video is in there. And I'm making fun of him for the fact that he subscribes to Mother's Basement, because he makes fun of Mother's Basement all the time. He shits on him relentlessly. He seems to consider him sort of a lol cow, but he still subscribes and still watches the videos. So I was like, if you think his videos are terrible, why are you watching them? And he was like, well, okay, for instance, this newest video he did about Kimetsu no Yaiba just talks about the show and allows me to make a decision of if I think the show looks cool or not. You know, like, maybe I want to check out this show. Like, I saw the clips from it, I heard some justifications for why it might be interesting, now I'm curious about it, and now I'll consider whether or not I want to watch it. And I thought, you couldn't figure that out from watching it? Like, you couldn't figure that out from just looking at the first episode? Like, this is a show I dropped immediately. You know, I watched the first episode, I did not enjoy it, it didn't appeal to my sensibilities, it didn't seem like a kind of story I would enjoy. People have talked about it continually as the season has gone on. Nothing that anybody has said about what happens has intrigued me. None of the clips that I've seen have interested me, because it all looks like the natural extension of what I saw in that first episode. It all looks like, yeah, okay, this is where I thought things would go. This is the show I expected this to be. I'm not surprised. And maybe Victor doesn't have that same ability. Maybe he didn't watch the first episode. Maybe he didn't listen to me talk about the first episode. Maybe he, you know, just is more entranced by the things that happen later in the show than he was before. But it's just the sentiment that that's what he was looking for. And I think that kind of content is the driving force of YouTube. The biggest overall force behind what everyone's trying to, you know, achieve is that feeling of, I am talking about something because it's a cultural event and people want to know about it. They want to know if it's good. They want to know why they should care. They want to know when they should start paying attention, when it's okay to stop paying attention. They want, you know, if we're going to look back into the past, we have to do it through the lens of how it is important to the present. Or, you know, we have to be celebrating the anniversary of something. There needs to be like a good reason to return. Why is this thing from the past still interesting today? And, you know, I always describe what Jeff does as SEO content, because he literally pays a guy to find out what is trending, what is the best thing to talk about at this moment to get the most views possible, and then he makes that video. And I'm fascinated by that because, first of all, how the hell do you need to pay a guy to do that? Just go on Twitter and look at the trending tab. But, like, what's particularly interesting to me about it is this idea that will always work. That just whatever is in the zeitgeist is what people want to know about. They're curious about it because they're hearing about it. They want to know what's going on. And I don't feel that way. I don't have any of that curiosity. I don't care about the stuff that's coming out right now. It's not interesting. Like, I don't want to see any reviews of any new Star Wars or Marvel movies because I'm not going to see them. Doesn't matter if people say it's good or not, because the people who say it's good don't have the same taste as me. And I know that. Because if they did, they wouldn't have said the last Marvel movie that I didn't like was good. You know, they wouldn't even be interested enough to continue watching them because they would be feeling the way I feel, which is just exasperated and bored and don't really give a fuck at all and just not interested in even this style of narrative, this whole conceit of cultural product. It just doesn't interest me. And I think the main reason that it interests so many people is that it's so big. When something comes out and it's a huge cultural event and everybody's paying attention to it and it's been marketed, it's been put in front of your eyeballs, you are inherently going to get curious about it. And I will watch reviews of these things from reviewers that I like. Like, I'll watch a YMS video, I'll watch a Red Letter Media video. Even if they like the movie, it's not going to make me want to go see it because I already know. I already know it's not for me. I just want to know what people are saying about it, you know? And I will only look at the people who I really care about to see what they have to say. But I can also understand why a lot of people don't even need to care about the person saying the message. They just want the information. And Victor has always come at me with this sort of tone of like, why aren't you covering this stuff? Like, I want someone to do it. I wish you were doing it so I didn't have to watch these other guys. You know, not just Jeff, but other people who he'll follow where, you know, he's complained to me many times, like, why aren't you covering this show? I want to know if it's good or not. And I'm just like, well, I don't care about it. You know, I don't care about the show. I would not watch a video about the show unless it was by somebody who I'm a fan of. You know, unless it was a well-written video that is interesting to me for, you know, in itself. Why would I bother, you know? And the result of that is I don't have videos about those shows, so I don't get that traffic, you know? And it's just really interesting to me that that's what people want, that's what he wants so badly, because I find way more intrigue in looking into the past or into the underground or just like looking for things that appeal to me specifically. And it's time consuming. It's not always an easy thing to do, but I bring those things to the surface. You know, when I find something interesting digging through the dirt, I bring it up and I put it in front of your face and show you this thing that's interesting. And that's what I want more than anything from content creators. I don't want to watch people talk about the movie that everybody's already going to go see because I already know about it. You know, I'm already aware that it exists. There will be an initial wave of reviews that I can check out. I can just look at the scores online, you know, if I just want to know the very basic, like, is this competently made or not? You know, like, I don't want to hear about the stuff that just came out because that stuff is not inherently interesting. And you're going to hear a lot more reviews that talk about a movie just being mediocre. You know, if you're talking about all the stuff that's coming out, then whether or not that stuff is good or bad, worth talking about, not worth talking about, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's current and new and people want to hear about it. So literally whether it's good or not is incidental. And I hate writing the review about how a show has nothing interesting to talk about. You know, I hate writing the review where I say, oh, well, you know, here's this anime. It's really popular, but it's totally generic. All the flaws in it are flaws I've already talked about in other shows. All the things that are good about it are things that are obvious on the surface. Why am I talking about this? I'm just regurgitating what you would know if you watched the show for yourself, which you could easily do instead of watching my video about it, you know? That's how I feel. And I want to see people... Like, to me, what a critic's job should be is to be the guy who watches everything and brings up the stuff you didn't know about, the stuff that didn't get the marketing push. Because if you are only talking about SEO content, you're using their marketing. You are a slave to the corporations, essentially. Like, the fact that so many people are talking about this movie before it comes out is because they have pushed it in front of everyone's eyeballs. You are just riding that wave. You're using the fact that this studio paid a lot of money to market their thing as a way to say, oh, you know, hundreds of thousands of people already know about this thing, I better talk about it. When what I would want from you is to go and find something that nobody's aware of and bring it in front of hundreds of thousands of people and show it to them. But it doesn't work that way because people aren't looking for it. People don't know what they don't know. People don't know that there are things they would be interested in that they've never heard of because they've never heard of it. They don't know it's already there. And if you make a video called, let's say, you know, review of Genocyber or something, like, nobody's going to click on that because they don't know what it is. Now, if you say, like, the best 80s anime you've never seen, they might be more interested. And you kind of have to do that. You have to market your video in this way that just talks about why you should care about the product. But here's the other thing. I don't even care if I'm supposed to care about the product, because that's not what's interesting to me. What's interesting to me is that you had something to say about it. So what I feel is the most missing from the current discourse is people just talking about something because it's interesting to talk about. People just talking about something that they just found and had thoughts about and brought it to the surface. Because it's very difficult to tell people, like, hey, this 80s anime that I would ultimately give a 6 out of 10, it's not even that great, but it's interesting for this or that reason, you should check that out and care about it. Like, that's not, it's a tough gap to bridge, you know? And I think it's worthwhile, and I think you can do it. I think I have done it many times, you know? But, like, it's just odd to me that it takes so much, like, kicking and screaming to drag people to something that isn't already in front of their face. It's like kind of disappointing to know that people aren't looking for anything other than what they've already heard about, you know, and that, like, truly the marketing wins out in the end. It's always going to be the biggest advertising budget that determines what the most people are going to talk about, as opposed to what's interesting or what would even intrigue that viewer, because they don't know. They just don't know it exists. And you would think that the purpose of following critics would be to find out about that stuff, to have somebody dig through it all, you know, the stuff you don't have time to do, and find the good stuff and recommend it to you. But what people will do is, even if they think that that thing sounds great, even if they watch the video, they love the guy talking about it, they think that sounds like an interesting movie, it's probably right up my alley, I'm really into it, they still will not watch it over something current. They won't do it. You can tell people this is the fucking coolest movie of all time. Nobody's talked about it, but it's really good. You should definitely watch it. And you could be like, oh man, I gotta watch that movie. I'm putting it on my on-hold list or on my plan-to-watch list. And then you will go and watch, you know, the popular seasonal show that you mildly enjoy. You'll continue watching season after season of a show that you think is pretty good. Or you'll, you know, go see a movie that ultimately you thought was okay. And even though you know that this movie that you would love exists, but you're like, what am I going to do with it after I watch it? Like, my friends aren't going to watch it. I'm not going to have anybody to talk about it with. Like, where's the sense of accomplishment of having participated in culture, of having, you know, become a member of the world around me that you're desiring by, you know, getting to watch the thing everybody's talking about? You don't have that. It's just pure self-serving, you know? It's just for you to enrich yourself. And maybe you don't know what to do with that. You know, you look at it and you say, yeah, this movie is cool, and like, now I have a favorite movie that nobody's fucking seen before, and this is all I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, is fucking proselytizing about this movie. But like, we need there to be more community dedicated to that. You shouldn't have to feel that way. There should be enough people willing to look back and to participate in a culture of the old, a culture of reflection, a culture of not riding the hype wave, of not just participating in whatever is being pushed to you by, you know, corporate interest, and just fucking looking for things that are interesting. Look for curators who show you interesting things, and then watch the interesting things and discuss those things with the other people who watched that curator. You know, form communities around the curation in itself. That is an interesting way to go about things, you know? One of my favorite things that ever happened on Twitter, and I guess this probably still happens, is group watches. Where, for instance, there was this one big Isao Takahata group watch that happened a few years back. And personally, up until that group watch, I was not even aware of Isao Takahata's work pre-Ghibli, or even really much about him in general. Like, I knew Ghibli, I knew Hayao Miyazaki, I'd seen a sizable number of Miyazaki films. I'd basically just seen Grave of the Fireflies from Takahata. Maybe I had seen Tale of Princess Kaguya by the time this group watch got rolling. I did not know about his extensive history before Ghibli and how he's one of the most like important anime filmmakers of all time. How he's made these extremely influential early animated films, and I certainly hadn't seen any of them. When this group watch happened, the idea of it was that there was a scheduled date every week or two where everybody was supposed to watch this movie either at the same time or at any point, before the next one, tweet about it using the hashtag, post screen caps, post your reviews, impressions, write blog posts and link them on Twitter and use the hashtag so people can read it. And what happened was a lot of fucking people watched Takahata's movies. And ever since then, and I don't know if this is what caused it or what, but Takahata's name has been way more common in anime discourse in the West ever since this. Like, I've seen tons of YouTube videos about Isao Takahata's filmography. I've seen tons more videos about older anime. Like, the amount of discourse I started seeing about, like, those old Toei films and shit, which I had literally never heard of. And I've been an anime blogger, by the time this happened, for nearly 10 years. I've been an anime fan since 2001. I didn't know about this stuff because it didn't get talked about. Not even in the anime magazines I grew up on, which are often about reflecting on older stuff going back to like the 80s. We're talking about going back to the 60s, 70s, even the 50s, and nobody was doing that before, and I don't know if this group watch is like a direct, catalyst for any of this, but it was just so interesting to watch the conversation change. And I know that a lot of it is happening in communities dedicated to it, of people who, are really interested in like old stuff and they talk about it together and then they make videos about it. They try to drag more people in. But the hardest thing about it is just finding people who are legitimately willing to be interested in that stuff, who are willing to, participate. And I think that the only way we're really going to get more people to do that is through things like that group watch, where there is a community effort. There needs to be this feeling of, you're not just watching this video because you're not just watching this movie because I made a video about it necessarily. You're watching this movie because a whole bunch of people are watching it together and we're talking about it and we're remembering it and we're making things out of the inspiration that it gave us. If I just make a recommendation of some 80s movie and then nobody else ever covers that movie again, maybe I didn't have that much of an impact talking about it. One of the biggest impacts I've had in my career, possibly the biggest. People like to talk about SAO and all that shit. Sure, maybe I caused a lot of people to shit on SAO. But the real thing I did was get people to talk about K-On! Because when I got into the anime sphere on YouTube, I mentioned that K-On! Was my favorite anime and a bunch of people tore me apart. They were like, K-On!, what the fuck? And in the anime blogging days, it was not as though K-On! Had been this hugely respected show. It had won over a lot of people, including me. I was a fan of it right from the start, but not nearly to the extent I eventually would be. And, it wasn't talked about as, this classic. It wasn't talked about this incredibly well-made anime. After I did my analysis series on it, a lot of new people watched it, and a lot of YouTube videos came out. Suddenly, the conversation around K-On! And Kyoto Animation was just way more rampant. And, this also owes to, Sakugaboru and their dedication to, chronicling KyoAni for so long. Had a lot to do with, helping to disseminate information about the studio. But, just that feeling I had when, before me, there was no positive takes on K-On! On YouTube, and after me, there was all these new people watching it, all these new people talking about it. That was the most gratifying thing I've experienced as an anime content creator. That was, the best impact I ever felt from my career, was this feeling of I introduced people to K-On!, And there's lots of other things that people could be introduced to that could have this follow-up, this community, this discussion. They don't even have to be amazing works of art. They just have to be things that are interesting enough, that resonate with enough people, that more people will talk about it. And I want to see people doing that from a grassroots angle of talking about it because you're interested in it, because you found it, because you have thoughts on it. You want more people to know about it, not because a corporation wants any of that. Not because Disney made everybody feel the need to talk about it for easy money on YouTube. Instead of waiting for something to come along that you get to talk about, make people talk about something. Figure out what is interesting. Figure out how you can make it interesting for other people. figure out how you can make them participate in it, and figure out how, you know, we can create a community of discussion of things that aren't current, that aren't hyper relevant, that aren't SEO primed. Make it SEO primed, you know, make it optimized by making people care, making people talk about it. This kind of growth takes a long time, and it takes, you know, but it happens. I mean, it happens kind of frequently, really. Like, for instance, Konosuba might be a good example of a show that did not have any hype surrounding it before it went to air. Kimono Friends, another good example. These are shows that nobody was talking about, nobody had heard of. And in the realm of anime, we have the luck of this chart, this monthly, or this seasonal chart that, you know, every show will get watched by a lot of people because they'll just go down the whole chart. If something's good, people will talk about it. If enough people talk about it, it spreads. Eventually, it has a lot more fans. Eventually, it develops a community, you know. And those are shows where, you know, I might have made a video about Konosuba like right before it got super popular, and then that video got shitloads of traffic, you know. So like, you can make this happen. You can, you know, get people to care. But again, people are more likely to do it if it's current, if it's new. You know, even in those cases, those shows, they got popular because they had just aired. I want to see people diving back into the past, bringing something to the surface, and making people care about it then. And, you know, I want to do a better job of it myself. I like talking about old stuff. I like talking about classics. It doesn't pay off, you know. I made this anime classics movie night video, for instance, and like, there's other reasons that it's not a huge success. It's very long, you know. It's about 2 movies almost nobody's heard of, so I couldn't really make an eye-catching thumbnail out of them. I don't really know what kind of title would be appropriate for the video that would draw people to it. It's a drab presentation of this video because I don't know how to make it interesting if you don't already care. If like the idea of learning about classics doesn't appeal to you, I don't know how to help you, you know? Like, if I see classic movies, I'm like, oh, I want to know what's classic. Well, there's a classic I've never heard of. Let me check it out. But clearly that instinct doesn't exist in a lot of people. So, you know, I got to figure out the branding. I got to figure out how to make people care. Maybe there needs to be group watches. Maybe there needs to be like a concerted effort. But that's what I want to see. This got rambly and long, but I hope you enjoyed it.